Hello and welcome to a YouTube video that is going to look at decimal numbers. But I'm going to start by going really broad and just talking about how our number system works. Now we do something called the decimal number system. Now decimal is a very important part of decimal is DEC, det or des. It comes from the Latin or Greek word for 10. So it literally just means 10. Now this is a very important number in the way our number system works. So I'm going to write down hundreds, tens and ones that you'll be very familiar with. Now if I put a number 1 and I have the number 1 and I have 1, 1. Now I know that to get the 1 over here I have to have 10 of them. So if I have 10 ones, so I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you'll notice that the number moves from the 1 column to the tens column, and I put a placeholder in here so as to not mix the two numbers together. So the magic part of our number system is as soon as I have 10 of these, I get one of those. So let's carry it on. If I had 10 tens, I get one of these. And I put two placeholders in. So I have a number 100. One of these, if I have 10 of them, I get 10. If I have 10 of these, I get 100. Equally, if I split it up by 10, if I split this into 10, I get 10. If I split this into 10, I get 1. So you'll notice that every time the magic difference between these numbers, there and back, is 10. So to get from hundreds to tens, I have to split it into 10. To get from tens to hundreds, I have to have 10 of them. Now you might think, hang on, this is a decimal session, so why are you showing me hundreds, tens and ones? Because everything works exactly the same. So I'm going to scroll my page down, and I'm going to have hundreds, tens and ones again. But we know I can get more. We know I can have thousands and 10,000 and 100,000 and millions and so forth. But I can make a number smaller. So let's start with my 1. I know that if I make it 10 times bigger, I will get 10. But I can have 1 and split it. Because I'm assuming that if you ever buy a cake, you know, a large big cake, you don't eat the whole cake. You share it. And our number system works like that. But remember, in the same way that the magic number was 10, our number system always works by 10. So I have to share it by 10. So I need to know what comes here. Well, firstly, I have a decimal point. Now, this decimal point is very important because this decimal point tells the reader straight away that if you go past the decimal point, you are talking less than 1. This way, it's 1 or more. This way, it's less than 1. So I need to know what my headings are. Well, notice with ones and units in the middle, it has a really common pattern here. So the next one I went to after ones going up was tens. So if I split it into 10, I get tenths. And so as to not muddle these up, I have a capital T for tens and a little t for tenths. I wonder if you're guessing what's going to go here. I've got ones in the middle, I go tenths, I go hundred or hundredths. This means I'm splitting a 1 into 10 or I'm splitting a 1 into 100. And the magic number between them, as always, is 10. If I have 10 hundredths, I get 1 tenth. If I have 10 tenths, I get 1 whole one. So what does a tenth look like? Well, I take the 1 and I put it into the tenths column. But you'll be going, well, hang on. We've got the same problem here. When I moved, let me show you that. When I moved my 1 into 10, I had to put a placeholder in. Now that is exactly the same thing I have to do here. I have to put a placeholder in the ones to show the reader that I am going into tenths. But hang on, you're going, hang on, Mr. Carter, this still looks like 1 because I have to have the decimal point as well. Now this shows me I get 1 tenth. So I can go 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, but then as soon as I get to 10, I get one whole one. It moves up. Now let me show you a hundredth. I put the 1 in the hundredths, but I need to put some placeholders. I need to show there are no tenths. I need to show it's a decimal number with my decimal point, and there are no ones. Now you'll notice the 1 is moving down each time. It's doing exactly the same pattern. It's doing the opposite pattern here. You might notice there is 1 0 in the 10 and 2 zeros in the hundreds. You might also notice there's 1 0 in the tenths and 2 zeros in the hundredth. The only difference is that I have to have the decimal point here. So now we've got a bit of more of an idea about how decimal numbers work and what they are. We can have a look at dividing. Just before I do that, I want to show you another way I can represent these. Now, 1/10 is the same as writing the fraction 1/10. I think that's important to know. 1/100th is the same as writing this. Because what this is saying is to get a whole one, you have to have 10. And we know that 10 tenths gives me one whole one. Now this one here is telling me, well, to get a whole one, I need to have 100 of them. Because 10 of these will give me 1/10. So I have to have 100 of these before I get to a whole one. So you'll often see it represented as fractions, just an extra thing. Now, let's have a look at putting this into practice by dividing by 10 and dividing by 100. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write out all of our headings. Now I'm actually going to, I think it's good practice to have hundreds, tens and ones in here. So hundreds, tens, ones, decimal point, tenths, hundredths. Now we can carry on. Let's have a look. We know that if I went up another one after 100, so I've got my ones in the middle, tens and 10, hundred and hundredths, thousand and, I'm hoping you're shouting out, thousandths. The next ones, if you wanted to have them, would be 10,000s and 10,000ths. Because it follows exactly the same pattern. You've got ones, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000, 100,000s, millionths. It follows the opposite pattern of this side. And actually the important number, just to remember when we do this, is the ones. Because this is our starting point. This is what we start from. We always start from ones and we go tens, tenths, hundred, hundredths, thousand, thousandths, and so forth. So let's take a number. Let's take the number 25. And I said to you, could you divide it by 10? Well, we know that if we move to the column once to the left, we're multiplying and getting bigger. Once to the right, and we're getting smaller. So to divide by 10, all I have to do is go one column across. But here's something I'm just going to do. I'm going to put some decimal points going down my line. This will be so to move by 10, to divide by 10, I move my two 20s become two ones. Because if you have 20 and you split it into 10 piles, you'll get 2. But I have to move, the 5 will follow it. This goes 2, 5. This has to also go 2, 5. You'll notice I've now got 2.5. If I have 10 2.5s, I get 25. Because they've each moved one column to the right. This one has moved, the 2 has moved one column to the right. And the 5 has moved one column to the right. And that's it. That's it. Let me do one more. And then I'm going to show you hundredths as well. So if I scroll down, actually I'm going to do my titles again. I hope you don't mind. I want you to be able to see all the time. Hundreds, tens, ones, decimal point. Important thing to remember. Tenths, hundreds, thousands. Let's put some decimal points in to remind me and help me. Let's start with a smaller number. What if I started with the number 1.5 or 1.5? Well, to divide this by 10, all I've got to do is move each number once across. So the 1 moves once across to the right, shows it's getting smaller, and the 5 moves once across. But there is one last thing I need to do here. I need to put the placeholder in. Just to make it really clear to the reader that this is less than 1, I put my placeholder here. If I've got numbers to the right of the decimal place, I have to have a 0 in the ones to make it really clear. Remember, ones are our central number. These are crucial. I always have to have something in this column, even if it's just a placeholder. Can you think of a single number in the world that does not have something in the ones column? I can't. If I go really small, I might have a 0 here. If I go really big, I might have a 0 here. For example, the number 100 would still have a 0 here. But there has to be something in that ones column. Big thing to remember. Now let's do some hundredths, shall we? So let's divide by 100. So again, hundreds, tens, ones, and I hope you're shouting out decimal point. Ones are in the middle, so now I have tenths, then I have hundredths, then I have thousandths, and I could have 10,000ths as well. To make it easy for me to work, I'm going to put the decimal point in, and I'm going to divide by 100. So let's start with the number 25 again, which is the number I started with a moment ago. Now, to divide this by 100, I've got to divide it by 10 and divide it by 10 again. Okay, so a good way of looking at this, if I write the number 100 up here, divide by 100. Well, if I started at the number 1, to get to 100 I have to move twice. So to divide by 100, I have to move twice the other way. It's the same pattern. And you'll notice if you're dividing by 100, it's got 2 zeros in the answer there. It tells you how many times to move. So my 2 has got to move into the ones, and then it's got to move again. It's got to move once, twice, so my 2 jumps over here. My 5 has also got to move twice, once, twice. You'll notice it follows the 2 perfectly. So this is dividing by 100, but you'll be shouting at me, I hope. I crucially have got nothing in the ones column at the moment. Something has to be there, so I put a placeholder. So 25 divided by 100 is 0.25 because it has moved, each number has moved twice in the place value headers. Now when I'm doing maths all the time, I write these headers. Get used to writing these and it just helps you start to see and understand. I feel like doing a little bit of fractions for you here. This is, remember, I've got 2 tenths and 5 hundredths, or you could say I've got 25 hundredths. So a way to write this number here is like this. I have 25 hundredths, because if I have 100 hundredths, I get 1 whole one, and I've got 25 hundredths, or also can be said as 2 tenths and 5 hundredths. But 2 tenths is the same as 20 hundredths, so I have 25 hundredths there. Let's do one last one. I know it's a nice long video here. I reckon I might be getting up to 15 minutes. I hope my battery and my storage, doesn't run out, or my battery. So I'm going to work a little bit quicker. Let's put my decimal points down. Let's start with the second number I had, which was 1.5. And I've got to move both numbers twice because I'm dividing them by 100. So the 1 goes 1, 2, and works its way into the hundredths. And the 5 goes 1, 2, and works its way into the thousandths. Placeholder time. There's nothing in the tenths, so there needs to be a placeholder. And there always has to be something in the ones, so there's the placeholder. So 1.5 divided by 100 is 0.015.